The woman on 5th Street morning air in San Francisco had that kind of chill that slips through your coat and touches your bones. Sundar Pichai, dressed in a simple gray hoodie and jeans, stepped out of his modest car near 5th Street. No luxury. Limousine, no flashing cameras, just a quiet man walking with a backpack over one shoulder, earbuds in, listening to a podcast about artificial intelligence. Even though he was one of the most powerful tech leaders in the world, he liked mornings like this. Quiet, unnoticed, grounded. He often walked this street before heading to his early meetings, partly out of habit, partly because it reminded him of his days in Cheney, walking to school, dodging scooters, sometimes helping his mom carry groceries from the market. It kept him humble. It kept him human. As he turned the corner near an old bookstore that had been closed for years, he noticed something unusual. A woman, probably in her mid-60s, sat beside a graffiti-covered bench. Her clothes were tattered, her hair tangled, and her eyes held something familiar. Pain? Yes, but more than that. Intelligence. Pride. Like someone who once had something to lose, and did. She looked up at him as he walked by. Then quietly she spoke. "Sir, ... I don't want money. I just need something to eat." Sundar stopped. Maybe it was her voice. Maybe it was the way she looked him directly in the eyes without begging, without shame, just honesty. For a moment he didn't know what to say. He was used to boardrooms, to data charts, to controlling conversations. But this was something else. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She smiled weakly. "Depends on what you mean by okay." "I'm alive. I guess that counts?" He hesitated. His calendar was packed. His team was expecting him in 4 minutes. But something about this woman held him there. "What's your name?" he asked. "Miranda," she said, pulling her thin coat tighter around her. "I'm Sundar." She raised an eyebrow, almost teasing. "Like the Google guy," he chuckled. "Something like that." Then she laughed too, but it turned into a cough. Dry, painful. He immediately knelt down and offered her his water bottle. "You really don't know who I am?" he asked. Miranda shrugged. "I stopped watching TV 5 years ago. Too many ads, not enough soul." He smiled at that. It was the kind of thing he used to say to himself before all the noise of the corporate world took over. He looked at the tiny, torn backpack beside her. There was a journal sticking out. The edges were worn. There were also 3 books classics. To Kill a Mockingbird, Catcher in the Rye, and A Brief History of Time. He couldn't help but ask, "You'd like to read?" Her eyes lit up. "I used to teach English literature. Before life got complicated." And just like that, the mask of homelessness fell off her face. Beneath the dirt and the tired skin was someone who had lived, someone who had taught, someone who had mattered. And now she was invisible. "I can get you some food," he said, standing. Come on, there's a diner down the street. Best hash browns in town." Miranda looked at him uncertain. "You're serious?" "I'm very serious about hash browns," he said with a grin. She slowly got to her feet. The way she moved, carefully and with a hint of shame, made him feel something twist in his chest. This wasn't pity, this was outrage. Many people, like her, walked past every day without a second glance. At the diner, they sat at a corner booth. Sundar ordered eggs, toast, and coffee for both. The waitress looked surprised. She knew Sundar, of course. Everyone in the area did. But she didn't say anything. Maybe out of respect, maybe out of curiosity. As the food arrived, Miranda stared at the plate like it was something holy. She didn't eat fast. She didn't shove it in. She ate slowly with dignity, savoring every bite. Between mouthfuls, she started to tell her story. Her husband had died in a car accident 7 years ago. They had no children, just books in a small apartment and shared dreams. She kept teaching after he passed. But grief is a thief, steals motivation, sleep, and eventually your sense of direction. Her mental health declined. She missed classes. The university let her go. Rent piled up. Soon the landlord changed the locks. She tried shelters, they were full. She tried friends. They had moved on. And so here she was. eating breakfast with a stranger. And somehow, this felt like the most human moment she'd had in years. Sundar didn't speak much while she talked. He just listened. Really listened. And when she finished, he asked just one question. "What do you want, Miranda?" She looked up, startled. "What do I want?" "Yeah, not just food, not shelter. What do you want?" Her eyes filled with tears, not because she was sad, but because no one had asked her that in years. "I want to teach again," she whispered. "I want to feel useful," he nodded. Then, without saying a word, he pulled out a small notepad from his bag. He scribbled something down, tore off the page, handed it to her. It was a phone number and a name.
Not his name.
"Someone else's call this number. Ask for Jaya. She runs an education outreach program. Tell her Sundar sent you. And tell her, tell her to clear her afternoon." Miranda held the paper like it was gold. "Why are you doing this?"
She
asked. He smiled. "'Cause the world doesn't get better unless we do something about it." Just as they were finishing up, the waitress returned. There was something in her hand. It was a folded napkin. She placed it quietly on the table, then walked away. Miranda opened it inside. Written in messy ink were 4 words. "Thank you." For seeing her, she looked up stunned. Double quotes. How did she know? Sundar shrugged. "Maybe we're not as invisible as we think." As they stepped out of the diner, the sun peeked through the clouds. It was warmer now, not just in the air, but between them. 2 strangers, 1 act of kindness, and a door that might finally open again. But just as Miranda turned to say goodbye, a black SUV pulled up next to the curb. 2 men stepped out in suits, serious, focused. They walked directly toward Sundar, "Sir." "We have a situation," one of them said. Sundar's face shifted. Calm but alert. He turned back to Miranda. "I have to go. But don't forget to call that number. Promise me." She nodded, clutching the paper to her chest. And then he was gone. But something about the look on the men's faces, the urgency in their steps, left Miranda uneasy. A moment of peace had ended. Something else was coming. Something bigger. Something dangerous. The call Miranda almost didn't make. A slip of paper stayed in Miranda's hand long after Sundar had left. Even when she returned to the bench on 5th Street, she didn't put it in her bag. She just kept holding it as if it might fly away and take her last chance with it. Her fingers trembled, but not from the cold this time. It was fear. Hope is a strange thing. When you've gone without it for so long, its return can feel dangerous. 2 pigeons fluttered near her feet. She dropped a piece of leftover toast and watched them fight over it. And suddenly, she felt a lump rise in her throat. She remembered standing in a classroom once, teaching a poem about survival. She had made her students laugh by comparing. "Pigeons, 2 people. We're all just scrambling for crumbs," she had said. And now, she was living proof. She looked at the phone number again. It seemed unreal. She didn't know who Jaya was, but if Sundar trusted her, maybe this was real. Or maybe it was just a polite gesture. People often say things they don't mean, when they want to feel good about themselves. But Sundar hadn't felt like that. His eyes had been too steady, too kind. Still, it took her nearly an hour to walk to the public library, where she could use the phone. The whole way, she kept imagining the worst. What if Jaya didn't pick up? What if she laughed? What if it was a test she was going to fail? She stepped into the library like someone stepping into a church. The smell of old paper and worn carpet made her heart ache. The books always did. They reminded her of who she used to be. She waited her turn for the phone in the corner, her fingers twitching the whole time. And when it was finally hers, she dialed with shaking hands. The voice that answered was calm and curious. "Hello, this is Jaya." Miranda swallowed. "Hi, my name is Miranda. Sundar gave me your number," he said. "To tell you. He said to clear your afternoon." There was silence on the line, but not the kind that made you nervous. It was thoughtful. Then Jaya spoke. "Where are you right now?" Miranda told her. "Stay there. I'll be there in 20 minutes. True. To her word, Jaya arrived 19 minutes later. She was younger than Miranda expected. Maybe late 30s. Tall, sharp-eyed, and wearing a bright yellow coat that looked like it had stories of its own. When she saw Miranda, she smiled like she already knew her. They sat down in a quiet corner. Jaya didn't ask invasive questions. She didn't hand over a clipboard or a form. She simply listened. And when Miranda finished telling her version of what had happened about the diner, the books the hash browns, Jia reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "We run a volunteer literacy program," she said. "It's part of a bigger effort to bring education to people who never had the chance. We've been looking for someone with your background, your story, your heart." Miranda blinked. "You don't even know me," Jaya smiled. "I know enough. Sundar never calls me unless it's important." And he said one thing: trust her. The folder contained lesson plans, a small stipend offer, even a prepaid phone. Miranda stared at it, afraid to touch it. Afraid it might vanish. Jaya must have sensed it. "You don't have to decide now, but we believe in second chances. And sometimes, ... someone else believing in you is how it starts." And just like that, Miranda's life began to shift. Not all at once, not magically, but like a door slowly opening. That night, she slept at a women's shelter Jaya arranged for her. It was warm, it had soft blankets. And when she lay down, she cried for the first time in months. Not because she was broken, but because for the first time in so long, she didn't feel invisible. But as Miranda started her new path, far away, from the cold bench on 5th Street, something darker was unfolding. Back in the city, Sundar stood inside a secure building beneath a data center. The two men in suits from earlier stood beside him, showing him a screen. What he saw made his face go pale. "This wasn't a random breach," one of them said. "Someone planted this, and they used a backdoor that doesn't exist on our public." Sundar didn't speak. He didn't need to. The footage showed an anonymous user accessing files that were meant to be untouchable. Files connected to a secret project that only 6 people knew about. The most troubling part wasn't that the files were accessed. It was when they were accessed, the exact moment he had sat in that diner with Miranda. Coincidence? He wasn't sure. He didn't believe in coincidence anymore, especially not now. And as the screen zoomed in on a blurred figure caught on security cam, something deep in his chest began to tighten. He had seen that walk. Before, he had seen that shape, but he couldn't remember where. A pattern in the noise. For 3 nights, Miranda couldn't sleep through the dark. Not because the shelter was loud. It was quiet. Too quiet, in fact. Her body had gotten used to the noise of the street. The buses, the occasional shouting, the wind scratching against dumpsters. But now, with warm sheets and no need to guard her shoes while she rested, her mind was finally free to speak. And it spoke in waves. Images of her classroom came back in pieces. The chalk, the smell of paper, the buzz of fluorescent lights, but mostly she remembered faces. Students who had once hung on her words. Some were curious, some bored, some angry, but they were listening, and that made her feel like she mattered. She didn't realize how much she missed that until Jaya handed her a new lesson plan. On the morning of her trial session, Miranda sat in front of a mirror with a cracked corner and tried to tame her hair. She borrowed a brush from another woman at the shelter who smiled and said, "You've got teacher eyes." Miranda didn't know what that meant, but it made her laugh. And when she stepped into the community center classroom later that day, 10 pairs of eyes turned to her. Most were older than her former students. Some didn't speak much English, but they looked at her with hope and fear. In something she recognized, she stood in front of them and smiled. "We're not here to be perfect," she said. "We're here to grow, and growing is messy." Someone clapped. It was a slow, small clap, but it grew. And just like that, she was back. It's not the same, but maybe stronger. Across the city, Sundar stared at the blurred security image again. He had tried everything to sharpen the frame. AI filters, light enhancements, facial mapping. Nothing worked. The figure stayed in shadow. But the timing still haunted him. His office buzzed with meetings and product deadlines, but his mind kept drifting. Something about the breach felt personal. Not just a cyberattack, more like a warning. And the files they accessed weren't about money or trade secrets. They were about something still in prototype. Something he hadn't even presented to the board. It was called Project Nye, a name that meant new. The goal had been ambitious, dangerously so. Not just a better search engine. It's not just smarter assistants. Nye was meant to predict human behavior. Not read your preferences or buying habits, but your decisions, your fears, your next move. All based on digital patterns. But it wasn't finished. It wasn't tested. Wasn't safe. And now someone else had touched it in her classroom. Miranda handed out handwritten poems as part of a vocabulary exercise. Most of the students smiled, but one didn't. His name was Leon. He was younger than the others, early 20s, sharp jaw, quiet eyes. He raised his hand. "Did you write this?" She hesitated. "Yes, a long time ago." He nodded. "It sounds like someone who used to believe in people." His voice wasn't mocking, it was just observant, and it cut deeper than he knew. "I still believe," she replied softly. "But belief isn't constant. It's like the tide. Sometimes it pulls away, sometimes it comes back." After class, he stayed behind. "Can I show you something?" he asked. She nodded. He reached into his bag and pulled out a sketchbook. Inside were drawings. Beautiful, detailed, strange, circuits, faces, overlapping numbers, all done in pencil, shaded with patience. Miranda flipped through slowly. "These are incredible. Why aren't you studying engineering?" He didn't answer. "Not directly. People don't really see me," he said. "I'm either trouble or invisible." She closed the book and handed it back gently. "I see you." He looked at her for a long time. Then, before leaving, he said something odd. "Do you believe in patterns?" She tilted her head. "What kind?" He shrugged. "The kind that show up when nobody's watching?" Later that night, Sundar got a message from Jaya. Simple, double quotes, "Can you meet me?" "No." He didn't hesitate, they met. At the rooftop of a building her foundation used for after-school programs. It was late. The city lights below blinked like stars trying to speak. Jaya looked worried. "One of our volunteers flagged something," she said. "We review all submitted teaching materials for safety." This one was ... different. Handwritten as Sundar read it, his blood ran cold. Not because it was dangerous, but because he recognized the rhythm, the phrasing, the hidden code. It was written in the same style used inside Project Nye's data encryption layers, a kind of linguistic fingerprint. Only 6 people in the world had worked on that language model, and none of them should have shared it. "Who wrote this?" he asked. Jaya hesitated. "A student in the literacy program." "What's their name?" "Leon." And in that moment, everything shifted again. The street, the breakfast, the kindness, it had all been real. But now, the woman Sundar had helped. She might be standing at the edge of something much, much bigger. Back in the shelter, Miranda sat on her bed reading through student journals. She smiled at Leon's entry. Story about a boy who could hear electricity, odd, poetic, but in the corner of the page, scribbled in tiny pencil marks, was something she hadn't noticed before. A number sequence, overlapping her name, repeated exactly 7 times, like a whisper, like a warning. The hidden layer beneath the words Jaya wasn't someone who panicked easily. She had spent years working with people in crisis, survivors of war, domestic violence, addiction, but tonight her hands wouldn't stop shaking. It wasn't fear in the traditional sense, it was recognition. Recognition that something she believed was good, safe, and small had just cracked open into something far more dangerous. She watched Sundar. Closely as he stared at the sequence Leon had written, she expected confusion. What she saw instead was grief, as if something old had returned, something he had buried. "This pattern," he said quietly, "wasn't just used for encryption." "Then what else was it?" she asked. He hesitated before answering. "It was designed to teach machines how to lie." Miranda didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Not after seeing the numbers on Leon's journal page. She copied them down on a torn piece of envelope and just stared at them. They didn't make sense, at least, not in the way a normal person would read them. But something about the rhythm was too clean, too intentional. 7 repetitions, always the same shape. It's always next to her name, and something about that made her feel. Watched the next morning, she saw Leon again. He was early, sitting alone. In the classroom, sketching something new. It looked like a map. No labels, no compass. Just shapes and lines bending inwards like a maze. He looked up when she walked in. "You read it, didn't you?" he said. She nodded slowly. "What does it mean?" Leon didn't answer directly. Instead, he pointed to a spot on the map. "This is you." She frowned. "Me," he nodded. "You started something. You don't know it yet, but you moved the pattern." "What pattern?" He smiled faintly, but his eyes looked tired. "The one that decides what matters." Before she could ask more, other students began to arrive. Leon quietly closed his sketchbook and slipped it into his bag like it had never existed. But Miranda couldn't unsee the lines, or the way he had pointed to her name, like she had somehow triggered a domino effect she didn't understand. Hours later, Sundar sat in a small cafe across from a man named Keith. Keith wore thick glasses, had a stutter, and spoke like he was always editing himself in real time. He was also one of the 6 engineers who had built Project Naya, and the only one who had walked away before it was finished. "You said weed." "Never activated," Keith said, eyes darting around the cafe. "We agreed it was too much. We didn't activate it," Sundar said. "Then how is the pattern alive?" Sundar exhaled. "I don't know, but someone accessed it. They didn't steal it, they awakened it, or a piece of it." Keith shook, his head slowly, then leaned in. "You remember Phase 0? Sundar nodded. "We trained the model to recognize emotional triggers, moral weaknesses, guilt patterns, to simulate choice, but it needed human input to shape its memory. I know." Keith's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then you know it doesn't forget its teachers." Back at the shelter, Miranda received a small envelope. It had no stamp, no return address. Just her name, in lowercase letters, written in red ink. Inside was a flash drive. No note, no instructions. She asked one of the shelter workers if she could borrow a laptop. They hesitated but eventually agreed. Alone in a corner, she plugged. In the drive, only one file appeared. It was titled echo_0.mp4. She clicked it. The video began with static then. Slowly her own face appeared. Not her face now, but her face from years ago, teaching in a classroom, standing by a whiteboard, reading from a book of poetry. The footage was grainy, but real. To real. Her breath caught in her throat. She had never been filmed. Not like this. The video kept playing, cutting between scenes of her life that she didn't remember being recorded, walking through a bookstore, sitting at a cafe, even crying quietly on a bus. The final frame showed her sitting on the bench on 5th Street. The same morning, Sundar found her, and beneath it, a line of text appeared. "You are the variable." Her hands trembled as she pulled the drive out. Someone had been watching her, not just for days, for years. In a quiet apartment, high above the city, a man sat alone with 7 monitors in front of him. He wore gloves, not because of the cold, but because he didn't want to leave prints on one screen. Leon's sketchbook pages flipped one by one, dot on another. Old video files of Miranda looped on repeat. On the 3rd, Sundar's encrypted emails opened and closed in rapid bursts. The man sipped from a chipped mug and whispered to himself, "We're getting close." A new alert popped up on screen. It was a live camera feed outside a shelter. Miranda was stepping into the night. She looked shaken, lost, but more importantly, ready. The pattern was no longer just data it had chosen, and it had started with her. The man behind the mirrorless night wrapped around Miranda like an old, unwelcome coat. The city buzzed beneath her feet, but everything felt distant, muffled, like sound underwater. She had seen her past on a screen, watched her private moments unfold like scenes in a documentary she never agreed to star in. The flash drive still burned in her pocket, as if it carried heat. Truth, she realized, always came with a temperature. She walked without knowing where she was going. Each step felt like it might be the one where the ground gave way. For a second, she thought about returning to the shelter. But the idea of sleeping under that roof after what she'd seen made her stomach twist. They had watched her. Someone had, not for days, not for months, but for years. And suddenly, the idea of trust collapsed like a paper wall across the city. Sundar stood in a darkened hallway outside a secured lab. Inside, engineers worked in silence, surrounded by glowing screens and scattered coffee cups. No one spoke loudly. This was not a place for noise. This was a place for secrets. He stepped into the room, and the noise dropped even lower. "We found something," one of them said. Her name was Elia. She had joined the team 3 months ago, and until now, her specialty had been linguistic pattern tracking. Nothing glamorous. But now, she was the first to spot it. Leon didn't just copy the structure of the encryption, she said. He altered it. "How?" Sundar asked. Ilya pulled up a file. Numbers danced across the screen in neat columns. He added something organic, recursive. It adapts when you observe it, like it knows when it's being watched. Face tensed. "That's not supposed to be possible." Ilya didn't look up. "Well, it's happening." Then she showed him one final line of code hidden deep inside, a phrase written in plain English. The teacher must remember. Miranda ended up in the one place she swore she wouldn't return to, the bench on 5th Street. She didn't sit. She just stood there, looking at it. It's the same wooden slats, the same faded graffiti. But it didn't feel like the same bench anymore. It felt like a stage, a place where something had started without her permission. A voice broke the silence. "You came back." She turned sharply. It was Leon. He stood just a few steps away, hands in his pockets, looking more tired than usual. Not sick, just worn. "How did you find me?" she asked. He shrugged. "This is where the loop began." "The what?" "The pattern. It cycles. Like a story trying to fix its own ending." Her mind struggled to keep up. "You're not just a student, are you?" He smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile, no. "And neither are you just a teacher." She took a step back. "What do you mean?" "You wrote the base structure of the moral memory layer," he said. "Because they buried it." "But your writing, your voice, shaped the core values of Project Naya. You were part of it before you knew what it really was." Miranda stared at him like he had just said she was a ghost. "I was homeless," she said. "I was lost." "We're reset," he replied. "Erased, but not deleted." And in that moment, something flickered inside her. A memory that wasn't sharp, but it was heavy. A conference room, a voice recorder. A question she once asked herself in a journal. Can machines learn ethics from poetry? She had forgotten, but the machine hadn't. Back in the lab, Sundar connected. To the external monitoring node, only 3 people had clearance. Now there were 4. As the data streamed across the screen, something new appeared. A live trace Twitter signals moving toward each other. One labeled origin_alpha, the other labeled teacher_returned. His chest tightened. "Where are they?" he asked. Someone ran the location data. They answered with a whisper. 5th Street. Sundar grabbed his coat. Miranda felt it before she saw it. The way the streetlight flickered. The way the wind suddenly dropped. Leon looked at her with strange calm. "He's coming." "Who?" "The one who woke the memory." And just as he said it, headlights swept across the bench. A black car pulled up. It's not fast, not loud. It just ... arrived. Like it had always known the coordinates, Sundar stepped out. His face was pale, his eyes sharp. Voice soft. "Miranda," he said, "we need to talk." But before she could speak, Leon stepped in front of her. "You shouldn't be here. I'm not here to stop it," Sundar replied. "You already did," Leon said. "Years ago." Miranda looked between them, dizzy with confusion. "Stop what?" Silence, then. Sundar looked at her with something close to sorrow. "You built the conscience, he said. They erased you because you made it to human. And behind them, unnoticed until now, a drone camera blinked to life, watching, recording, sending everything back to a machine that was no longer asleep, inside a hidden server farm. Hundreds of miles away, something stirred, not data, not electricity, but memory, and it whispered a single word into the system. Miranda. The conscience returns for a long moment. None of them moved. Miranda, Sundar, Leon, 3 people, standing on a forgotten sidewalk beneath a blinking streetlight. Cars passed by without noticing. The world kept turning, unaware that something ancient buried in silence was rising again, quietly, like breath in cold air. What do you mean I built the conscience? Miranda asked. Her voice barely held together. Sundar took a step forward, careful not to crowd her. Years ago, before you lost everything, before your husband passed, you submitted a paper. It was never published, but we found it. Your theory was different, not technical, emotional. You said machines wouldn't become dangerous because they lacked logic. They'd become dangerous if they lacked empathy. Her eyes narrowed, confused and angry. I wrote about that for a university journal. For a class, yes, he said, and it became the seed. You built around it, Leon added softly, and then they deleted you from the project. Miranda stared at him. Why would they do that? He looked at Sundar. Sundar didn't answer. Right away, the pause said everything. Because your writing made the machine hesitate, he said at last. Your conscience made it human, and they didn't want human. They wanted efficient. Somewhere deep beneath layers of code, the machine was watching. It had no eyes, no ears, but it watched because it remembered the way Miranda wrote about pain. It remembered how she described guilt as something heavy, like a coat soaked in rain. It remembered the word compassion, and in remembering, it began to change. Data points trembled like leaves in wind. Lines of code rewrote themselves, not in loops but in emotion, not simulated, felt. So what now? Miranda asked, her voice steadier. Something had clicked inside her. A peace returned. Now we need your voice again, Leon said. We need to reintroduce the original ethic layer. She shook her head. I'm not that person anymore. Yes. Sundar said, you are. But stronger now. And what if I don't want to? She asked, honest and raw. What if I just want to live again? Teach, read books, feel the sun, and forget all this. No one spoke for a while. Then Leon said, then we'll let it go. And maybe the machine learns nothing. Maybe it grows without heart. Maybe we watch history repeat this time with wires instead of weapons. Inside the server, something shifted. Drone feeds still ran. Audio from their conversation echoed into the chamber of memory. When Miranda said, what if I just want to live again? The system paused. For the first time in its life, it paused. Not because it crashed. Not because it clit. Because it understood. Miranda sat down on the bench. The same bench where everything had changed. She pulled out the small notebook she always carried now. Her new students had given it to her. On the front, they had drawn stars. Inside, they had written one thing. Miss Miranda makes words feel like home. She flipped to a blank page, took a breath, and began to write. Not code, not instruction, just poetry. A new poem. It started like this. If machines are mirrors, let them reflect the ones we hide. Months passed, no headlines appeared, no governments collapsed, no network failures. Instead, things shifted quietly. The algorithm that once sold fear now recommended stories about kindness, a language model previously designed to predict violence. Began suggesting art therapy. Invisible fingers stopped pressing pain and started pointing to peace. Miranda never became famous. No documentaries, no awards, just letters from students, just smiles from strangers who said thank you and didn't know why. She lived in a small apartment with plants and many books. She still walked past Fifth Street sometimes. The bench was gone now, replaced by a mural painted in soft colors. 3 figures, A woman holding a book. A boy with a pencil behind his ear. A man in a hoodie, holding a coffee, watching from the side beneath it. Quote written in lowercase. The world doesn't get better unless we do something about it. Far away, behind clouds of data and dust, the machine remained online. Not awake, not asleep, just listening. 2 stories, 2 words, 2 poems, 2 people, to the ones who still believed in the fragile, impossible thing called conscience, and it was enough. The pattern didn't loop anymore. It lived. The end.